October 12th, 2025, a moment that changed everything. It was 2:47 a.m. on October 12th, 2025, and the night was unusually still over the strategic heart of Novocherkassk, Russia, a town 560 miles from the Ukrainian border. The darkened landscape, bathed in the faint light of a waning moon, held its breath as a group of Ash partisans lay in wait. They were hidden in the shadows only 300 feet away from a critical railway line, one of the most important lifelines for Russian logistics in the southern front. As they watched the calm, the only sound was the soft rustling of the wind through the trees, the soft chirping of night insects, and the rhythmic ticking of time. In the distance, a Switchblade 600 drone, small but deadly, sliced through the cold night air at 115 mph, its engine nearly silent as it raced toward its target. The crew of the Ish unit had no intention of attacking the train itself. This would be far more calculated, far more devastating. While the partisans' eyes scanned the tracks, the Russian officers responsible for this critical sector were blissfully unaware, fast asleep in their command posts, thinking their positions were secure. They couldn't have known that the largest threat to their logistics operation was not an incoming missile or fighter jet, but something far more insidious, a small, nimble drone with the power to sever Russia's southern war machine in one deadly strike. The Switchblade 600 drone wasn't designed to destroy a train. No, the train itself wasn't the real target. The target was something far more vulnerable, something that controlled the entire railway system, the signal control box. And with that single strike, the entire Russian rail network would come to a grinding halt. A 2,000-ton train loaded with 2,000 rounds of artillery shells would be frozen in its tracks, a sitting target in the middle of nowhere, defenseless and immobilized. This moment was the endgame of a meticulous intelligence operation born from a fatal flaw in Russia's armor. The Aish partisans, aided by Russian insiders, had spent months mapping every inch of the 12-mile stretch of track that led to this critical supply route. Every twist, every turn, every section of the rail was studied, analyzed, and memorized. They had detailed knowledge of the exact train schedules, including the precise timing of the 2,000-ton train carrying 150mm artillery shells, a vital supply line for Russia's ongoing military operations in the southern regions of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. The real brilliance of this plan lay not in the attack itself, but in the perfectly timed execution. The partisans knew that the Nebo-M radar used by Russia to monitor the airspace had a 3.60° upward tilt, a tiny blind spot near the ground, perfect for the stealthy approach of a small drone. While the radar might have been capable of tracking high-speed jets and missiles, it was powerless against a low-altitude, slow-moving UAV that could slip right under its radar and into the kill zone. But even with this knowledge, the challenge was not just technical, it was psychological warfare. The Aish operatives went a step further, deploying a brilliant disinformation campaign. They spread rumors within Russian ranks about a potential FSB mole inside the Rostov command, feeding into the already brewing paranoia. The effect was immediate. Russian commanders, now second-guessing every move, began slashing their patrols by 50%, leaving critical gaps in their defenses and opening the door for the partisans to strike. This single railway line was the artery that pumped 60% of all artillery shells and rockets to the front lines in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. The train carrying 2,000 rounds of artillery shells was the lifeblood of Russia's war effort in the south. If Ukraine could sever this supply line, it would paralyze Russia's southern war machine. The stakes could not have been higher. The entire southern front relied on this one route to get ammunition to the front lines, and without it, Russia's artillery would fall silent. The success of this operation wasn't just about disrupting logistics, it would have strategic consequences for the entire Russian military campaign in the south. And yet the mission still seemed impossible. Russia had recently upgraded its defenses, including the Pantsir S-1 air defense system, with a 360-degree radar specifically designed to detect and destroy small drones at ranges of up to 2.5 miles. Additionally, a Lear-3 electronic warfare system covered the entire region with a 150-mile GPS jamming bubble, rendering most forms of communication and navigation useless. This wasn't just about getting a drone through. The question was, could Ukraine strike at the heart of this billion-dollar logistics network and survive the immediate fallout from every defense system in a 12-mile radius? At 2:51 a.m., the train crossed into the predetermined kill zone. The partisans knew this was the critical moment. Timing was everything. A direct strike on a moving target was risky, so instead of going after the train itself, they targeted the signal control box, the heart of the railway system. The Switchblade 600 drone, expertly guided by the Aish operator, flew directly toward the target, a small concrete signal box that controlled the entire railway system in this section. As the drone approached, the tension mounted. The drone's 34-pound shaped charge hit the box with precision, sending a focused jet of molten metal punching through the concrete. The delicate control systems inside were vaporized in an instant. For the Russian engineer, the control panel began flashing red. The signal light ahead went dark. As per protocol, an unsignalized track meant the train must stop immediately. The train slammed on its brakes, and the screech of metal on metal echoed through the empty, desolate landscape. The train was now stationary, exactly as the operatives had planned. But this wasn't just a lucky break. This was the product of months of planning, of knowing exactly when and how to strike. With the train now immobilized, the second phase of the plan began. The Aish operatives, having already anticipated this moment, had carefully concealed M18A1 Claymore mines along the tracks in the days leading up to the strike. These mines were hidden under gravel and debris, designed to avoid detection by the thinning Russian patrols. At 2:52 a.m., the signal was given. The radio pulse triggered the mines simultaneously. Steel ball bearings traveling at nearly 4,000 feet per second erupted from the mines, cutting through the steel rails. They didn't just sever the tracks, they shredded them. The heavy rails were ripped from their moorings, twisted and rendered completely impassable. The train, with its precious cargo of artillery shells, was now completely stranded. But the explosions created an undeniable thermal and electronic signature that would soon catch the attention of the Russian defense network. The alarm bells were ringing at Russian radar installations. The hunt had begun. As expected, the Nebo-M radar system immediately detected the explosions. An operator previously fighting off sleep now saw a spike in activity on his screen. The Russians knew something had happened. They didn't know what yet, but Aish operatives were already 2 steps ahead. They had anticipated this response. The moment the Pantsir S-1 radar system activated, Ukraine's decoy operation kicked into gear. 3 Bayraktar TB2 drones, launched hours earlier, flew a predictable high-altitude path to draw the Russians' attention. The Russian air defense system reacted exactly as planned, 3 decoys destroyed in quick succession. The Pantsir system operators were confident. Mission accomplished, they thought. But the Russians had just fallen for the oldest trick in the book, misdirection. While the Russian systems were distracted by the decoys, the real threat was already on its way. While the Russian air defense system was busy destroying the decoys, the true threat approached from a completely different vector. The decoys had drawn the Pantsir's attention, but Ukraine's real weapon was already on its way. The Orlan 10 drone, a captured Russian UAV that had been heavily modified by Ukrainian engineers, was the new star of the operation. Unlike the decoys, this drone wasn't relying on radio signals that could easily be jammed by the Lear-3 electronic warfare system. Instead, it flew autonomously using pre-programmed flight paths and advanced inertial navigation. This made it invisible to the Russian electronic systems designed to detect drones via radio frequencies. The mission of the Orlan 10 was deceptively simple, yet incredibly effective broadcasts, a specific X-band signal that mimicked the targeting radar of a high-priority Ukrainian missile drone. The Pantsir system, unable to distinguish the real threat from the decoys, locked onto the drone and calculated a firing solution. For the Russian air defense system, this was the moment they had been waiting for, the perfect target. The radar locked onto the Orlan 10, and before the Russian operators knew it, 657 E-6 missiles were launched into the night, their guidance systems set to intercept the target. However, the Orlan 10 drone had a trick of its own. The signal it emitted was a fake designed to lure the Pantsir system into thinking it was targeting a high-value missile. The missiles, designed to obliterate aircraft, raced toward the real target, the Russian ammunition depot several miles away. But they were never intended for the Orlan 10 itself. Instead, the missiles struck a vital ammunition storage facility detonating 15,000 pounds of artillery shells in a catastrophic explosion. The result was a fireball that illuminated the entire sky, briefly turning night into day. The shock wave rippled through the landscape, shattering windows for miles. The impact was so intense that even satellite systems picked up the explosion in real time. For the Russian military, this was not just a loss of weapons, it was a blow to their very supply chain. With one devastating strike, the Aish partisans had severed a critical supply line that Russia had relied on for ammunition resupply. The explosion in the ammunition depot sent shockwaves across the Russian military. Russian forces scrambled, and within minutes the sound of a Mi-28 Havoc attack helicopter lifting off echoed in the night. This was no automated response, this was a dedicated hunter, armed with Viker anti-tank missiles, ready to track down and destroy the source of the humiliation. The mission of the Mi-28 Havoc was clear: eliminate the Aish operatives. The Russians knew who had caused the destruction, they just didn't know where to find them. The helicopter began its search with the help of thermal imaging systems, scanning the area for any signs of heat signatures or unusual activity. But what the Russians didn't know was that the Aish operatives had anticipated this move. They knew the moment the explosions happened, the Russians would deploy attack helicopters to hunt them down. And so the next part of the plan was already in motion. As the Mi-28 Havoc scanned the area, the Aish operatives quickly activated their last resort measure, a homemade radio frequency jammer. It wasn't sophisticated, but it didn't need to be. The jammer was designed to send out a chaotic signal on the 5.8 GHz frequency, the frequency that the Viker missile's radar relied on for targeting. The Viker missile, once launched, could not distinguish the target from the noise. For the Mi-28 Havoc pilot, the missile veered off course and detonated harmlessly in an empty field. The Russian helicopter pilot was stunned. How could this happen? They had just locked onto the target and now their missile had gone astray. The pilot quickly attempted to reorient, but the Aish operatives had one more trick up their sleeve. Realizing that their missiles had missed the Russian forces, turned to their final defense, the Peresvet system, a high-powered laser designed to destroy incoming drones. The system was aimed directly at the Ukrainian UAVs, and the Russians were confident it would neutralize the threat. But Ukraine's final weapon wasn't a drone that could be destroyed by a laser. It was a drone that wasn't being remotely controlled. Instead, a separate Ukrainian team from a mile away launched a swarm of 20 FPV drones. These drones were not autonomous. They were manually controlled by the operatives using fiber optic tethering. The advantage of this system was that it made them immune to any form of electronic warfare, including Peresvet's laser. The Peresvet laser had no effect. The drones, flying low and fast, sped towards their target, the key logistics bridge connecting Novocherkassk to the front line. The Mi-28 Havoc pilot saw the swarm on his radar, but couldn't react in time. The drones, moving at 60 mph, were too fast to intercept. Within seconds, the drones slammed into the bridge's concrete support pillars, detonating their two unarmed C4 charges in a rapid sequence. The impact was devastating. Each charge created a shock wave that weakened the foundation of the bridge. The structural integrity of the 600-foot bridge began to collapse. Steel beams groaned under the strain before snapping, and with a deafening crack, the central span fell into the river below, carrying with it 500 feet of railway track. The bridge, a vital link in Russia's logistics network, was now destroyed. The train with its artillery shells was stranded, and the way forward was blocked completely. As the bridge collapsed and the explosions continued to reverberate, the Russian emergency services were deployed. They scrambled in every direction, trying to manage the damage and contain the situation. However, their priorities shifted quickly from rescue operations to damage control. The Russian forces' immediate concern was secrecy. They needed to prevent any leaks about the scale of the operation. Their efforts to contain the situation were largely focused on maintaining a media blackout and preventing information from reaching the outside world. However, satellite imagery from Ukrainian intelligence painted a clear picture of the destruction. High-resolution frames showed a 30-foot chasm where the bridge once stood and a railway line that no longer existed. The attack was devastating, not just physically, but strategically. The destruction of the railway line, the ammunition depot, and the bridge set off a domino effect that would ripple through Russia's war efforts. 60% of Russia's artillery supply to the southern fronts was cut off. The train carrying artillery shells now stranded couldn't move forward, and 3 more backup trains were stuck behind it. The artillery went silent. Russian artillery pieces already in place were now useless without the shells they depended on. More importantly, Russia's command structure fell into a frenzy of paranoia. The rumors of an FSB mole carefully planted months earlier now blossomed into full-blown chaos. Russian commanders suspecting betrayal at every level failed to coordinate effectively. Meetings devolved into shouting matches for 72 critical hours. Instead of making decisions, they hunted for ghosts. While Russia's command structure was paralyzed, Ukraine pushed forward, exploiting the silence of the Russian guns and advancing 3.5 miles along the Zaporizhia front. What Russia initially called a temporary logistical disruption quickly became a strategic catastrophe. In a matter of hours, Ukraine had proven that, in modern warfare, the winner is not always the side with the most expensive weapons. Instead, it is the side that uses those weapons with the most terrifying ingenuity. With a handful of $400 drones and a well-executed plan, Ukraine had turned a billion-dollar Russian supply line into a worthless pile of rubble. So here's the question for you. If you were the ATH commander, what would you have hit next with your remaining assets? The main fuel depot or the Nebo M radar installation?